For years, I played the perfect hostess, cooking, cleaning, paying for every holiday, while my husband and his family called it tradition. They never asked if I was tired. They never even thanked me. But one Christmas, I decided to change the rules. I smiled, served dinner, and then handed them the bill. What happened next? No one saw it coming, and it was only the beginning of my quiet, devastating revenge. I've been married to Daniel for over 10 years. From the outside, our life looked picture perfect, nice house, steady jobs, holiday cards with smiling faces. But inside that picture frame, I was barely holding it together. From the moment I married into his family, it became clear there were expectations. And not just the usual daughter-in-law things, no, this was something else. I was expected to host every gathering, cook every meal, pay for everything, and smile while doing it. At first, I told myself it was just part of the adjustment, that it was temporary, that one day they'd see how much I gave, and maybe, just maybe, appreciate it. I worked full-time at a healthcare office downtown, 40 hours a week, sometimes more. Yet come every Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, and even birthdays or game nights, I was the one prepping casseroles, scrubbing floors, ironing napkins, and making sure the guest bathroom smelled like eucalyptus. It wasn't just the effort, it was the money too. I paid for all the food, all the drinks, the decorations, and the cleanup. My husband, he'd show up, maybe stir something once for the photo, and then go back to watching football with his brother. His mother, Margaret, would glide into our home like she was royalty arriving at a banquet. Not once did she offer to help, not with the cooking, not with the cost, but she always had something to say. "A little salty this year," she'd comment, tapping her fork against the stuffing. "Your tablecloth is wrinkled," she'd whisper with a forced smile. Daniel would just shrug. "It's tradition," he'd say. "Mom's always been that way. Just let it go." And for years I did. I let it go. I let a lot of things go. But one Thanksgiving, in the middle of a Texas heat wave that left me sweating through my apron, something inside me cracked. We had 20 people coming over. I had been up since 5 a.m., trying to time the turkey, the pies, the sides. By the time we sat down, my feet ached so badly, I could hardly feel them. I finally sat at the table, thinking maybe, just maybe, I'd get a quiet minute to enjoy the food. I'd worked so hard to prepare. Margaret took a sip of wine, looked around with a satisfied little smile, and then said, "Loud enough for everyone to hear, we expect you to cook for every holiday, host every event, and pay for everything. That's what a good wife does." I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth, and then Daniel, without missing a beat, leaned back and smirked. "It's tradition." That was it. No thank you, no acknowledgement, just 2 smug sentences declaring that my exhaustion, my labor, my bank account were all part of the role I had somehow agreed to play. I smiled back. Not wide, not fake, just enough to say, "Noted." And in that moment, I made a decision. Christmas would be different. In the weeks that followed, I said nothing. I played my part as always quiet, agreeable, dependable. But in the background, I was planning. Not revenge exactly, just a shift in the script, a new tradition. I called a local catering company, one with a stellar reputation, booked them for the holiday meal, prime rib, roasted vegetables, sweet potato casserole, everything down to the cranberry sauce and the apple pie. I also hired a cleaning crew to come that morning and return the day after to handle the mess. I paid in full. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed it to be perfect. When Christmas Day came, our house was spotless. The air smelled like cloves and butter. The table was set beautifully. With fresh flowers and linen napkins, I didn't have to wash myself. As everyone arrived, they were full of compliments. "This looks amazing," Daniel's sister gushed. "I didn't know you could cook like this," his brother said between bites. I just smiled and said, "It's a new tradition." Margaret didn't seem to notice at first. She was too busy sampling the potatoes and bragging about her pecan pie recipe that I hadn't used. Daniel, as usual, was lounging on the couch, beer in hand, acting like he'd set the table himself. I waited until dessert, when everyone was full and drowsy, leaning back in their chairs with satisfied sighs. I stood up slowly. "I'm glad everyone enjoyed the meal," I said, my voice calm but firm. "And I wanted to let you all know this year we're starting a new tradition." Heads turned, eyebrows raised. I've covered every holiday for the last 10 years, financially, physically, emotionally, but that ends today. From now on, we all share the load cooking, hosting, and paying equally. That's what a good family does. Then I reached into the sideboard and pulled out a thin folder. Inside was a neatly itemized bill from the caterers and cleaning service. I placed it in the center of the table. Silence. Margaret's wine glass froze midair. Daniel sat upright, eyes narrowing. "You're kidding," he said. "No," I replied. "This was $1,400 and worth every penny." Margaret's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "You hired strangers to cook our family meal?" "No," I said. "I hired professionals to give me a chance to enjoy the day just like the rest of you." And guess what? It was wonderful. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You should have told me. Would you have helped?" I asked softly. He didn't answer. For the first time in years, I wasn't tired. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't resentful. I was just clear. And that clarity, it was only the beginning. After Christmas, things shifted subtly. At first, the group chat that had once been filled with dinner planning, carpool coordination, and Margaret's passive, aggressive recipe suggestions went quiet. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe everyone was busy. Maybe they were still digesting the meal and my announcement. But when Daniel's sister hosted a New Year's brunch and forgot to invite me, I knew better. The photos showed up on Facebook, of course. There they were, all smiling in a sunlit kitchen, mimosas raised, a quiche on the counter that I would have been asked to make in years past. Daniel was in the photos too. I stared at his face, his arm wrapped around his sister's shoulder, that easy grin he saved for family. I hadn't even known he'd gone. When he came home later that night, I didn't ask where he'd been. I wanted to see if he'd tell me. He didn't. Instead, he said, "I think you upset my mom." I paused, folding laundry. "About Christmas?" "Yeah," he said, scratching his head like the thought hadn't fully formed until that moment. "She said you embarrassed her." "She embarrassed herself," I said plainly. "I didn't do anything but serve a meal and tell the truth." Daniel exhaled hard, like I was being unreasonable. "You could have handled it differently. And you could have backed me up," I shot back. Not angry, just tired. He didn't respond, just walked into the bathroom and shut the door. That was how things went for a while. Lukewarm conversations, muted affection. We talked logistics, groceries, bills, the dog's vet appointment, but the warmth had gone missing. It wasn't just me noticing. I could feel it in the way Daniel pulled away when I leaned in for a kiss, in the way he locked his phone, something he'd never done before. Still, I stayed hopeful. Change doesn't happen overnight, I told myself. Maybe they'd come around. Maybe Daniel just needed time. Then came the invitation. Well, not for me. Margaret decided she'd be hosting Easter this year. According to Daniel, it was her way of doing things the right way again. I laughed when he told me. "Oh, great," I said. "Tell her I hope she enjoys it." He looked uncomfortable. "She also asked if you could bring the ham." I blinked. "The ham? And maybe the mashed potatoes. She said you have the nicer tablecloths too. I stared at him, not angry, not even surprised anymore, just stunned at how casually the request came. So she wants me to cook and provide things for a dinner. I'm not even involved in planning? Daniel shrugged. It's just easier if you don't make a big deal. I'm not making a big deal, I said, setting down the dish towel. I'm just not doing it. That night, we slept in silence. The next morning, Daniel left early and didn't kiss me goodbye. A few days later, I got a Facebook message from Margaret. Not a call, not even a text. A Facebook message. It read, "Since you've abandoned your duties, don't expect to be treated like family anymore. Don't come crying when Daniel realizes what kind of wife you really are." I stared at it for a long time. I didn't respond, but something in me snapped. It wasn't the insult. It wasn't even the threat. It was the assumption that I would come crying, that I would regret asserting myself, that I'd crawl back into the role they carved out for me without ever asking if I wanted it. I started collecting things, screenshots, receipts, notes, emails. I didn't know exactly what I was planning, but I knew I was planning something. Then, 2 days later, Daniel left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. He never left his laptop open. I wasn't snooping. I just needed to check the shared grocery list. But when I opened the browser, a tab was already up. An email from Daniel to a realtor, just confirming we're moving ahead with the second showing on the townhome. Wife is still unaware. I want to make sure I have options if she doesn't fall back in line soon. My hands went cold. Wife is still unaware. Fall back in line, like I was some kind of employee he could discipline. Or worse, a child he needed to threaten. I sat down, staring at the screen. He wasn't just pulling away. He was planning to replace me. And just like that, every doubt, every little moment I'd brushed off came rushing back. The locked phone, the quiet dinners, the missing kisses, the New Year's brunch he never mentioned. He wasn't being distant. He was making an exit strategy. I didn't cry. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I took a breath, closed the laptop, and started taking notes. I watched. I waited. I listened. And then came the second slip. A hidden folder on his desktop, screenshots of texts with a woman named Brooke. Photos, flirty messages, dinner plans. A message from his mom, Margaret. Brooke seems lovely. Much better fit. Just keep things quiet until you're ready to make the switch. Don't let her manipulate you. You're doing the right thing. That's when I knew this wasn't just about Easter. This wasn't even about me not cooking the ham. This was a full-blown plan, a coordinated effort to push me out of my own life while I still folded Daniel's socks and fed the dog and made his dentist appointments. But what they didn't realize? I'm not the kind of woman you quietly phase out, and I don't fall back in line. After that night, something shifted in me. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even heartbreak, not anymore. It was clarity. Cold, clean clarity. I saw the truth of my marriage, my role in Daniel's life, and what I had allowed for far too long. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a servant with a smile. And now, with Brooke waiting in the wings, he was preparing to swap me out like I was a worn-out appliance. Quietly, efficiently. Just another task on his to-do list. But I had other plans. I didn't confront him right away. I knew if I did, he'd gaslight me. He'd twist it into me being paranoid, insecure, overreacting. So I played it calm, cordial. I smiled when I had to. I made dinner, paid the bills, even asked about his day like nothing was wrong. But all the while, I was gathering more. The email from the realtor? Saved. The texts with Brooke? Screenshotted and backed up to a drive he didn't know existed. The message from Margaret about making the switch? Oh, I had that one printed, and tucked into a folder with a sticky note that read, "Family Values." I called a lawyer, a good one, quiet, sharp, and thorough. I brought every document, every account statement, every photo, and that's when I learned something that made me sit a little taller. The house? It was in my name. We bought it 3 years into our marriage, but the mortgage and deed were both under my credit because Daniel's was terrible back then. I'd forgotten that detail. He hadn't. His car? Also in my name. I'd financed it for him when his loan didn't go through. The dog? Registered to me. Even the couch he loved to nap on had been paid for with a bonus check I got from work. He thought he was building a life with Brooke. But all the bricks? They were mine. That Easter, I didn't go to dinner. I wasn't invited, of course. But I did send an email to the entire family. Subject line, family update. It read, "Hi all. Since I won't be joining you for Easter this year, I wanted to let you know what's going on. Daniel and I will be separating soon. He's already made plans, and I wish him and Brooke all the best. I know this may be a surprise to some of you, but those closest already knew. Yes, I'll be keeping the house. Much love, M." I hit send and turned off my phone. What happened after that? I heard secondhand from Daniel's brother Terry. Apparently, chaos erupted at dinner. Margaret turned white. Daniel stormed out. Brooke started crying and left early. And the rest of the family? Some whispered, some stared, but no one could pretend anymore that things were fine. Daniel came home that night like a man walking into a burning building. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted the moment he opened the door. I was in the kitchen, sipping wine. "Just a little tradition I'm starting," I said calmly. His phone was blowing up. Aunt Carol, his boss, even his pastor Margaret had apparently bragged about our perfect marriage to half the church. And now the truth was out. He tried the usual routine denial, deflection, then guilt. "You're ruining everything." I never actually cheated. It was just texting. I raised an eyebrow. "Your mother called her a better fit. And you were planning to move out without telling me." "That's not what it looks like," he muttered. I smiled. "Good. Because I've got screenshots, Daniel. And a lawyer." That shut him up. A week later, I served him papers, not just divorce papers eviction. He had 30 days to move out of my house. That's when Margaret started calling. At first, she ignored the situation, pretended it was all a misunderstanding. Then she switched tactics, sent me a long message about family, forgiveness, and not ruining her son's life over something so small. She ended it with, "You're better than this." I replied with one line, "Tell Brooke to bring the ham next time." The next few weeks were strangely peaceful. Daniel moved into an extended stay hotel. Margaret sulked in silence. And I, for the first time in years, breathed. But then came the final twist. Terry sent me a screenshot from Facebook, a private post Brooke had shared public enough that someone saw it. An ultrasound. The caption, "Can't wait to start this new chapter with you. So grateful for our little family." And guess who she tagged? Daniel. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch, but I did make a decision. I was going to the next family dinner. I wasn't going to sit this one out. For years, I hosted these gatherings, made them run smoothly, kept everyone fed and smiling. They didn't get to erase me just because I finally found my voice. When I showed up, Margaret answered the door with a tight smile. "Wasn't sure you'd come." "I wouldn't miss it," I said, walking past her into the house. Daniel was there, of course. So was Brooke, very pregnant now, wearing a sash that said Mama to be, sipping juice like she owned the place. The air was thick with tension. No one said much for the first half hour. Then Margaret stood up to make a toast. "Family is about forgiveness, growth, second chances," she said, glass raised. "We've all made mistakes, but today is about moving forward." I laughed out loud. Every head turned toward me. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, Daniel stood up. Don't start. No, you don't start, I said, reaching into my bag. I pulled out a thick folder, labeled tabbed. I handed it to him in front of everyone. What is this? He asked. Receipts. I said. Emails, texts, bank transfers, pictures. Proof you were planning a life with someone else while still sleeping in my bed. Brooke paled. Margaret gasped. Daniel sat down like his legs gave out. And then I turned to Margaret. You always talked about tradition. Want to know mine? Honesty, loyalty, respect. That's what a good wife brings to a family. I gave you all of it, and you broke it. No one said a word, and I wasn't done yet. Daniel sat there holding the folder like it was on fire. His hands shook as he flipped through the pages, screenshots of his messages with Brooke, emails to the realtor, even the bank transfers to that secret account. The longer he read, the redder his face became. Across the table, Brooke was frozen. One hand rested on her stomach, the other clenched around a napkin. Margaret looked like she wanted to crawl out of her skin. I stood in the center of it all, calm, centered, like someone who had just taken back everything that had been slowly stolen from her. Terry, bless him, actually clapped under the table. Damn, he muttered, shaking his head with what looked suspiciously like admiration. His wife elbowed him, but it was too late. Even Daniel's aunt, who had never so much as smiled at me in 10 years, nodded slowly, murmuring, I never liked that Brooke girl anyway. Daniel looked up, his eyes glassy now. I didn't mean for it to go this far, but it did, I replied. You had choices, and you made them. I messed up, he said, voice cracking. I know I did. But can't we start over? I tilted my head. Start over? After you tried to replace me in secret? After your mother helped you plan it? Margaret, who'd been silent up to this point, snapped. You're being cruel. This is our family. No, I said, locking eyes with her. This was my life, and you treated it like it was disposable. And with that, I picked up my purse, turned around, and walked out. No dramatic goodbye. No one ran after me. The door closed softly behind me. I sat in my car for a long time, hands resting on the steering wheel, listening to my own breath. There was no sadness, no guilt, just a quiet sense of release. I had finally said everything that had needed saying for years. The following weeks were quieter than I expected. Daniel officially moved in with Brooke. He didn't call, didn't text, not even to argue. Margaret tried a few more guilt-laced messages, but they went unanswered. Terry and his wife kept in touch. So did a few others from the family, mostly just checking in. I think they were testing the waters, unsure where their loyalty should land. Now that the house of cards had collapsed, I didn't care. I went on with my life peacefully, for once. I got up early, walked the dog, worked, made simple dinners, watched whatever I wanted on TV. The silence that used to hurt now felt like space, like air. And then came the knock. It was Daniel, looking tired, a little thinner, the same sweater he used to wear when we first got married, only now it looked too big on him. I wanted to talk, he said. I don't think we have anything left to say, I replied, keeping the screen door shut between us. I'm not happy, he blurted out. That's not my problem anymore, I said gently. He looked down at the porch boards like they might offer him a script. Brooke's different than I expected. You picked her, I said. She's pregnant. I know. She wants to name the baby after my dad. I raised an eyebrow. And what do you want? He didn't answer right away. Then he looked up, eyes dull. I want to go back. I blinked. To me? To before. I shook my head. Daniel, before is gone. You burned it down. He nodded slowly, then handed me a manila envelope. Inside was a signed agreement, giving me full ownership of the house, the car, everything we once shared. He was making it official. You don't owe me anything. I said. I know, he whispered, but maybe I can do one thing right. As he turned to leave, I watched him walk down the steps, a man finally carrying the weight of his choices. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to carry it for him. The weeks that followed were calm. No texts, no drama, just healing. Then, one Friday evening, Terry called. He sounded hesitant. You might want to know, he said. Daniel and Brooke, they're done. I leaned back into the couch. What happened? She kicked him out, Terry said. Apparently, he's not the man she thought he was. I couldn't help but let out a breath of quiet laughter. Took her long enough. She's keeping the baby, he added, and he's crashing with a friend. Says he doesn't know where he belongs. That's not my concern, I said. No, I know, Terry said. I just wanted you to know, because I think he finally understands what he lost. I thanked him and hung up. That night, I slept better than I had in years. A few months passed, and the seasons changed. I planted flowers in the front yard, replaced the rug in the living room, and finally painted the walls a soft, earthy green I'd always wanted but never got around to. I went to dinner with friends, took a weekend trip to the mountains, started reading again, even started painting a little badly, but with joy. I was living, not just existing, not just serving, living. And one morning, as I was sipping coffee on the porch, the mail arrived, a handwritten letter from Daniel. Inside was a note that read, I see it now, and I'm sorry. You gave everything. I gave nothing. I thought you'd always be there, and I never once asked if you were okay. I wish I'd seen it sooner. I hope one day you find someone who sees you the way I should have. But even if you don't, I hope you keep that peace. You deserve it. I read it once, then again, and finally, I folded it up and slid it into a drawer, not out of sentiment, but to remind myself that peace isn't given, it's claimed. And I had claimed mine. That summer, everything felt lighter. The air, my shoulders, even the silence in the house, which had once felt so suffocating, now felt like a space I'd earned, a sanctuary. I started filling the walls with things that made me happy, paintings I found at local markets, family photos from before the weight of someone else's expectations took over. I bought fresh flowers every Sunday, sometimes for the table, sometimes just because I wasn't performing anymore. I was simply being. I kept the dog, of course. He stayed curled at my feet while I read, followed me into every room, like a silent witness to the change. He didn't ask questions, just kept me company, the way he always had, a loyal presence in a world that had shifted beneath my feet. Occasionally, I'd still hear from acquaintances who were just now catching wind of the split. Some called it brave. Others said, I could never do what you did. But the truth was, I hadn't done it all at once. Leaving, letting go, standing up, it wasn't one grand decision. It was a series of small ones, saying no, holding my tongue, holding my ground, paying attention, writing things down, refusing to disappear. By the time I actually left, I'd already been gone for a while. I think that's what people don't always understand. Sometimes you disappear little by little, long before you walk out the door. That fall, I started volunteering at a local women's shelter once a week. Nothing big, just helping with meal prep, organizing clothes, talking with women who were figuring out their next steps. I never told them my full story, but when I looked in their eyes, I could see versions of myself. The quiet ones, the angry ones, the scared ones, the ones just starting to wake up. And I told each one the truth. You're not crazy. And you're not alone. That was the gift I hadn't expected, how standing up for myself somehow turned into reaching back for someone else. Then, one chilly morning in October, as I was getting ready to leave for the shelter, A small envelope arrived. No return address. Inside was a birth announcement. A photo of a baby girl. The name, Grace Margaret. Daniel's handwriting was on the back. "She's healthy. I thought you should know." I stood there for a long time, staring at the tiny face in the photo. A part of me expected to feel something sharp, regret, bitterness, grief. But instead, I felt still. Grace Margaret, named after the woman who had once told me not to come crying when Daniel left. I set the photo on the counter and walked away. That night, I burned it. Not in anger, but in ceremony. It wasn't about them anymore. Not Daniel. Not Margaret. Not Brooke. It was about me. About what I wanted to carry forward and what I was finally ready to let go of. Later that winter, Terry invited me to a small family gathering. "No pressure," he said. "Just a few of us. People who actually miss you." I went, and when I walked through the door, it was different this time. They didn't expect me to serve. They didn't ask me to host. They handed me a glass of wine, pulled out a chair, and told me I looked great. Even Margaret wasn't there. Terry's wife leaned over at one point and whispered, "You have no idea how many women in this family are proud of you." I smiled. Maybe I do. And I think that was the real surprise, how many people had been watching, waiting, hoping someone would finally say, "Enough." By spring, I had fully settled into my new rhythm. I started taking watercolor classes at the senior center, not because I was good at it, but because it made me feel like a beginner again, like a person with a future instead of someone trapped by her past. One morning, while walking through the park, a woman stopped me. "Excuse me," she said, "but are you the one who sent that email?" It took me a second to place her. Daniel's cousin's wife. She had been quiet at every family dinner, usually stuck in the kitchen with me while the men watched football. "Yes," I said. "That was me." She smiled. "I saved it." And then, with tears in her eyes, she said, "Thank you." That was the moment I realized I hadn't just saved myself. I had created a ripple. People were watching, and some of them, they were waking up. Maybe the biggest lie we're told is that keeping the peace is the same thing as keeping the family. It's not. Keeping the peace means staying silent, staying useful, staying agreeable. Keeping the family? That means telling the truth, even when it breaks the table in half, even when someone throws their fork down and storms out, even when it means starting over. So, to the women who've ever been told to fall back in line, to the wives who cook, host, pay, and still get asked where the mashed potatoes are, to the quiet ones, the tired ones, the ones who've carried more than anyone will ever know, this story is for you. You are not invisible. You are not replaceable. And if they expect you to serve just to be loved, that's not love. That's control dressed up as tradition. You don't have to stay at the table where you're only ever asked to pour the drinks. You can walk away. And when you do, you'll finally find out what it feels like to take your place, not at the head of their table, but at the center of your own life. As we grow older, many of us have learned to keep the peace biting our tongues, shouldering burdens, and giving more than we ever receive, because that's what we were taught good women do. But sometimes, what looks like harmony is actually quiet heartbreak. This story reminds us that love built on one-sided sacrifice isn't love at all. It's servitude dressed as duty. The lesson here is about reclaiming worth, about knowing when a tradition has turned into a trap, and having the courage to say, no more. It's never too late to stand up for yourself. It's never too late to let go of roles that no longer serve you. And most importantly, it's never too late to choose peace over performance. Whether you've been through something similar or know someone who has, let this story be a reminder. You deserve to be seen, heard, and respected, not just needed for what you give, but valued for who you are. Have you ever had to choose your peace over pleasing others? What helped you take that first step? Share your thoughts in the comments or send me your story. You never know who your truth might empower.